The restaurant was quiet, the last chairs stacked against the wall, the faint smell of coffee still lingering in the air. It was past midnight, the kind of silence that made even the hum of the refrigerator sound loud. Daniel Carter, the man who had spent the last 6 months working undercover as a dishwasher and part-time cook, knew the rhythm of the place by heart. But tonight, something caught his eye, something he hadn't seen before. In the corner booth, beneath the dim glow of a single lamp, a young waitress lay curled up. Still in her uniform, her apron was folded beneath her head like a pillow, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, as though the weight of the world was pressing down on her small frame. She wasn't just napping, she was sleeping as though this booth was the only bed she had. Daniel paused. He had spent months blending into this restaurant to understand his employees, their struggles, their joys, their frustrations. But this was different. This wasn't exhaustion from a long shift. This was survival. He hesitated before stepping closer. Her name tag still rested on her apron, Emily. She had started just 2 weeks ago. He remembered her shy smile, the way she apologized even when things weren't her fault, the way she seemed to linger after hours, like she had nowhere else to go. Now it all made sense. Daniel slid into the booth across from her, careful not to wake her. For a long moment, he just sat there, staring at the young woman who reminded him of something he had almost forgotten. What it was like to fight for every single day, to wonder if tomorrow would even come. Before his fortune, before his empire, he too had known hunger, loneliness, and the shame of asking for help. Emily stirred, her eyes fluttering open. The shock on her face, when she realized someone was sitting across from her, was immediate. She bolted upright, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean to. Please don't tell anyone. I'll leave right now." But Daniel didn't move. He simply raised a hand gently, his voice calm. "Emily, you don't have to apologize. You look like you've been carrying too much on your shoulders. Why are you here so late?" A tear welled in her eyes, and despite her best efforts, they spilled down her cheeks. She clutched her apron like it was the last thing she owned. "I lost my apartment last month," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I've been staying wherever I can. Sometimes a friend's couch, sometimes nowhere at all. I didn't want anyone here to know. I thought if I worked enough hours, I could get back on my feet. I didn't mean to fall asleep." Daniel felt something stir deep inside him. The CEO in him knew rules, policies, and boundaries. But the human in him, the one who had once been invisible in a world that only looked at success, saw himself in her eyes. What Emily didn't know was that this dishwasher sitting across from her wasn't who he seemed. Daniel Carter was the owner of this entire restaurant chain. A millionaire who had deliberately traded his suits for aprons to rediscover what mattered most. He leaned forward, his voice soft but firm. "Emily, you deserve more than this. You're working hard. But no one should have to fight alone. Can I ask you something? If you had the chance, not just to survive, but to actually live, what would you want?" Her answer was barely a whisper. A home. Stability. Just a chance to breathe without being afraid all the time. Something shifted in Daniel then, like a door unlocking inside him. He knew what he had to do. The next morning, while the restaurant buzzed with its usual breakfast crowd, Daniel asked everyone to gather. The staff, curious and confused, stood around with coffee mugs in hand. Emily stood near the back, still quiet, her eyes downcast. Then Daniel did something that would change everything. He pulled off his apron, placed it on the counter, and straightened his posture. The room fell silent as he began to speak. "My name isn't just Dan, the dishwasher. My name is Daniel Carter. I own this restaurant. Every single one of them across the state. For the last 6 months, I've been working here undercover to understand what really happens in the lives of the people who make this place what it is. And today, I want to talk about someone who inspired me more than she realizes. All eyes turned toward Emily. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. Daniel's voice wavered with emotion as he continued. Last night, I found Emily asleep in one of our booths. Not because she was careless or lazy, but because she had nowhere else to go. She's been fighting battles that most of us can't see while still showing up here with a smile. And I won't stand by and let one of my people fight alone. Whispers rippled through the room. Emily's hands shook as tears slid down her face. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. Emily, starting today, you're not just a waitress here. You're getting a full-time salary position, benefits, and assistance with housing. We're going to help you build the life you deserve. You've given this place your heart, and now it's time this place gives something back to you. The room erupted into applause. Some of the staff cried openly, others hugging Emily as she stood frozen in disbelief. She covered her mouth, overwhelmed, her body trembling as the weight of his words sank in. Finally, she managed to speak through her tears. Why me? Why would you do this for me? Daniel smiled softly, his eyes glistening. Because someone once did it for me when I had nothing. And I promised myself that if I ever had the chance, I'd be that someone for somebody else. You reminded me of that promise, Emily. You reminded me why I started all of this in the first place. For the first time in weeks, Emily's shoulders relaxed. She wasn't just seen. She was valued, believed in, given hope. And in that moment, something bigger than money or titles filled the room: humanity. The staff cheered louder, not just for Emily, but for the reminder that compassion still had a place in the world. And as Daniel looked around the room, at the tears, the smiles, the hope, he knew this was the real success. Not the restaurants, not the fortune, but the lives changed when someone dared to care. Emily stood there trembling, the applause echoing around her like a wave she wasn't ready to ride. She tried to form words, but all that came were tears streaming down her cheeks. Daniel walked over and placed the envelope gently in her hand, his presence steady and reassuring. The envelope was heavier than she expected. Inside was not just paperwork for her new role, but also a letter from Daniel himself, written in his own handwriting. It explained not only the details of her new salary and housing assistance, but also contained the address of a small furnished apartment, fully paid for a year in advance. At the bottom of the letter, one line made her knees weak. You deserve a place to call home. Welcome to your new beginning. Her coworkers surrounded her, hugging her, whispering encouragement, wiping their own tears. People who had once been just colleagues were now rallying around her like family. The entire restaurant felt alive with something bigger than food and service. It felt like love. That evening, when Emily walked into the apartment for the first time, she froze at the doorway. The place wasn't grand, but it was warm. A bed with fresh sheets, a kitchen stocked with groceries, and even a small vase of flowers sat waiting for her. On the counter was a simple note from Daniel. Every seed deserves soil to grow. Let this be yours. For the first time in months, Emily didn't cry from fear or exhaustion. She cried from relief. She curled up in her new bed, whispering gratitude into the quiet night, feeling the safety of walls that belonged to her, even if just for a while. The weeks that followed were like watching winter melt into spring. Emily flourished. No longer weighed down by survival, she began bringing ideas to the restaurant. New ways to serve customers, creative touches for the menu, even small improvements to staff scheduling. Daniel noticed. The girl who had once hidden in the shadows was now shining, her laughter contagious, her spirit lifting everyone around her. One afternoon, while the team gathered for a staff meeting, Daniel announced something unexpected. "We've always said this restaurant is about more than food. It's about family. And family grows stronger when we lift one another up. Emily, I'd like you to step into a new role. Assistant manager. You've proven that when given a chance, you don't just rise, you soar." The entire room erupted in cheers, louder than before. Emily's hands covered her mouth, her body shaking, as she accepted the offer with tears of joy. She walked over and hugged Daniel tightly. "You didn't just give me a job," she whispered. "You gave me my life back." Daniel smiled, his eyes reflecting the warmth of the moment. "No, Emily. You gave yourself your life back. I just reminded you that you deserved it." From that day on, the restaurant wasn't just a workplace. It became a home for everyone in it. And whenever new employees joined, they heard the story of the waitress who once slept in a booth, and the undercover boss who believed in her enough to change her world. Emily carried that story like a torch, not of pity, truth, but of proof that kindness, when given at the right moment, has the power to turn the darkest nights into the brightest mornings.